Hello, everyone. My name is Rob DeLeon, and welcome to Both Sides of the Bars. In November, New York Governor Kathy Hochul signed legislation that can make as many as 2 million people eligible to have their criminal records sealed. Under the so-called Clean Slate Act, people who complete their sentences and remain out of trouble for a set period, 3 years for misdemeanors and 8 for felonies, will have their convictions sealed. New York is now one of a dozen states that has enacted such laws, which are aimed at interrupting the cycle of recidivism by enabling formerly incarcerated people access to jobs and housing. In this episode, I'm your host, Rob DeLeon. I'm the Deputy CEO at the Fortune Society, and my two guests and I will discuss the importance of the signed legislation. Katie Schaffer, who is the Director of Organizing and Advocacy at the Center for Community Alternatives, also known as CCA, and Ismael Diaz Jr., a community organizer at CCA, who after returning home after 10 years of incarceration struggled to access employment, housing, education, and healthcare. So welcome both of you to the show, and I'd like to ask you to say a little bit about yourselves, starting with Ismael.
My name is Ismael Diaz Jr. I am the downstate community organizer for CCA, and I am also Hudson Link alumni. And I am here to speak for the people who can't speak for themselves and for the people that are too afraid to speak for themselves.
Katie Schaffer, I'm the Director of Advocacy and Organizing at CCA. And as an organization, we support and build power with people and families who have been impacted by systems of criminalization and incarceration, and excited to be here.
Thank you, and welcome to both of you. So I guess we'll jump right in and ask, what are the key provisions of the law?
Go ahead, Ismael.
The key provisions of the law. So Clean Slate will allow formerly incarcerated individuals to seek employment without landlords and employers doing background checks and denying us employment due to our past criminal history. And it's 3 years minimum, 3 years for misdemeanors and 8 years for felonies.
And can you tell us when it takes effect?
So it will take 365 days from November 16th for it to be into complete law. And then they've requested 3 years to implement the system and create a computer program for the records to be sealed automatically.
Okay. And could you tell us what the difference is between civil sealing and complete expungement?
So what the bill does is seal records in civil cases. So in cases of employment and housing, records are still accessible to criminal legal system actors, police, prosecutors, judges, the court system more broadly. The records are still accessible there even after they're sealed. But importantly, they are not accessible in most cases to landlords, to employers, so that people, as Ismael said, can access jobs, housing, education.
Great. And how does our Clean Slate bill compare to similar laws in other localities?
It's the most expansive law in the country. It's the most inclusive. It includes the largest number of people, the most people, as any bill in the country. Clean slate bills have passed in a variety of states, but most of them are narrower and more restrictive. Fewer people get access to sealing. There are more people who are excluded from sealing. And New York's is the broadest and most encompassing nationally.
Great, that's great. And going back to the beginning, right? Why did you guys begin the Clean Slate campaign? What need did you see that motivated you all to get started?
Go for it, Ismael.
So when I joined Clean Slate because I was already working after not being able to find a job, and then after receiving a 30-day probation and receiving a raise and a citation for excellent employment, on my 45th day I was terminated due to a background check. And I met with Katie through Hudson Link, and I began telling my story in Albany. And now I'm trying to help others because I personally experienced how hard it is for someone who's formerly incarcerated.
That's great. And, you guys were able to mobilize a lot of corporate folks to get behind the campaign. And, I'm wondering if you could share with us what your approach was to that.
Yeah, it's a good question. So one of the reasons that we were able to get Clean Slate across the finish line is that we had a really diverse and fairly unusual coalition of supporters that included both business, labor, as well as civil rights groups and other groups that you might more traditionally expect to support a bill like this. In order to sort of cultivate that realm of support, we identified potential supporters, and then we really made the case both to them and more broadly why Clean Slate is an economic development issue, that they are experiencing workforce shortages, that Clean Slate provides an answer to that they are sort of seeing a shrinkage in the economy. Clean Slate provides an answer to that. And so a number of the business groups got on board with an orientation that some of them were interested in the sort of more justice components of Clean Slate, but also really seeing it as an economic development and workforce development bill.
Wow. And I mean, similar where it comes to, the unusual suspects, no pun intended, you were able to get folks who were survivors of some kind of criminal act. And could you talk a little bit similarly to how you motivated those folks to be involved?
I mean, I think one of the things that we really know to be true at CCA is that people who are survivors and formerly incarcerated people are not two separate categories of people, that many formerly incarcerated people are also survivors of harm and of violence. And so some of it was drawing those connections and allowing people to speak both from the lens of being formerly incarcerated and from the lens of being a survivor. We also worked with a number of survivor advocacy groups and survivors themselves who really saw and understood that nobody benefits from permanently blocking people who have done their time from access to basic life necessities. That if people come home and they're unable to get a job, they're unable to get housing, they can't support their families, that we really set them up for a set of impossible choices.
Okay. And, I know that the process for getting a bill passed includes a lot of negotiation. There's a lot of folks who are, really interested in the issues. And then you have folks who have political interests. Could you talk a little bit about that process? Maybe what the original bill was like, where it ended up?
Yeah. So inevitably in Albany, part of what happens is that bills get negotiated. And so the version of the Clean Slate that we initially introduced, we knew was going to be negotiated. And so we tried to, frankly, give ourselves as much room for negotiation as possible. So that bill saw ceiling at 1 year and 3 years, 1 year for misdemeanors, 3 years on felonies. And to be transparent, we did not think that would make it through Albany in that form. But by giving the sort of starting with the most ambitious possible bill would let us end up with the best version of the bill, sort of in the end. So in the end, the waiting periods were, as Ismael said, 3 years on misdemeanors and 8 years on felonies.
Okay, and can you say a little bit about the carve-outs, folks who aren't eligible?
Yeah, so one of the sort of painful parts of the negotiation was at the very end, right before the bill passed. We tried to get the Senate and the Assembly to pass Clean Slate as a standalone bill. And the legislature, and in particular the Assembly, was very insistent that they wanted a three-way agreement with the governor. That gave the governor a huge amount of leverage. And she used that leverage to try to change the bill. And we were able to stave off some of those changes that she tried to make. But the one that we were not able to excludes people who have Class A non-drug felonies from accessing relief under Clean Slate.
Okay. And, do you think these exceptions are supported by research? Do you think, they were just motivated by politics? What are your thoughts around that?
They were straight politics. They were the governor wanting to both extract concessions and also, there's zero justification for this, right? That people, regardless of charge, who would be eligible for a Clean Slate, are home in their communities, are trying to support themselves. There is zero justification for barring them from relief under a Clean Slate. So no, there was certainly no policy justification for this. This was pure politics on behalf of the governor.
Straightforward. And we appreciate that. So, could you tell us, or do we know yet? And if we do, could you tell us what the process will be like, and when can someone say, I have a clean slate, or my record has been sealed?
So as Ismael said, the bill is enacted next November. And then the agencies responsible for implementing it have 3 additional years after that to fully implement it. We are working to pressure them to implement the bill as quickly as possible. So we are hoping that some people will have their record sealed prior to the full implementation timeframe, but under the law, they have 3 additional years. So at that point, they will be required to have sealed all eligible records that were sort of historically eligible, and then sort of from that point on, seal records as they become eligible.
Great. And could you speak to who some of the major supporters were? Can you mention who some of the, maybe like a shout out, whether it's on the legislative side, some of the business folks who came out, et cetera?
Yeah, of course. And then I'll pass it to Ismael to do some additional shout outs. So the sponsors of the bill were Senators Elnor Myrie of Brooklyn and Assemblymember Catalina Cruz of Queens.
Huge shout out to them.
Big shout outs to them. On the labor union side, District Council 37, 1199, the Mason tenders, the laborers, the hotel trades, the New York State Nurses Association were all incredibly helpful. Among the business community, the New York State Business Council, JP Morgan Chase, Verizon, Microsoft, all helped push the bill forward. And then hundreds of other groups, thousands of impacted people and supporters across the state who made this possible. Ismael, any folks you want to add to that list?
We also had Con Edison come on with us in Albany, and we had a lot of organizations that joined us and brought their members along, and are still supporting us with CCA on our current bills.
This is great stuff, and we're so thankful to you all. I am myself, as we make it clear at the Fortune Society, and those of us who do this work in the advocacy space, I'm formerly incarcerated. I'm someone who will benefit from Clean Slate ultimately. So thank you guys, of course, for the work you did. And Ismael, I mean, can you talk a little bit about what this was like for you? Is this the first such campaign that you've been involved in? Is there any other work that you're doing that you want to talk about in terms of any campaigns or any other work that you're doing?
So yeah, I'm like the rookie on the baseball team, right? I came in and got a home run, so like it's gonna be hard to match that in the future. But I am now the downstate community organizer for CCA, and I organize on Long Island and New York City, and we are currently doing the Communities Not Cages bill, which is Eliminate Mandatory Minimums Act, the Second Look Act, and the Earned Time Act, and we're actually going up to Albany on January 30th, and that's what I'm doing now, full time.
That's great. That's great. How about you, Katie? Anything on the horizon that you want to talk about?
Yeah, echoing Ismael, we're seeing 2024 as an opportunity for critical sentencing reform. As Ismael said, we have a campaign, Communities Not Cages, to overhaul New York's racist and unjust sentencing laws. And this is New York's sentencing laws were constructed during the 1970s Rockefeller drug law era and the 1990s tough on crime era. They are draconian, they are archaic, and it is time to shift what that looks like in New York State. And so the three bills that we drafted along with our members and our partners would get at some of the core injustices of New York sentencing laws. And we're hoping to make real progress on those this year.
That's great. That's great. And, I wonder with such a huge victory like Clean Slate, a victory on the city side, well, so far, it's not yet been signed. It was passed, veto-proof, the Fair Chance for Housing Act. With these kinds of victories, do you think that there's an appetite for doing more sensible criminal justice reform on the state side and city side? Do you guys think that it's an uphill battle, as though they've given folks their due, their fair due, or more than what folks should be getting? Like, I wonder what your take is on forecasting going after more criminal justice reforms.
It's a great question. We think there's sort of far more work to do and pathways to get it done. This year is an election year, which can sometimes mean that the legislature doesn't want to do anything. They want to run their campaigns. They don't want to pass meaningful legislation. So we're going to really have to grind to compel our lawmakers to take real action this year, and as well as set us up well for 2025.
Yeah, politics as usual, huh? And I mean, so is there anything else that you guys want to share with the viewers of both sides of the bars? Any thoughts you all have that you feel like might not have come across just yet in the time that we've been on?
Go for it, Ismael.
Well, just, we need to be educated more. So that's what I'm trying to do, trying to teach people more, like I've learned, and I'm still learning about Albany and all the process. But we just need to not give up because we're formerly incarcerated, and by educating each other and unifying, we'll be able to do more with in numbers than trying to do it by ourselves.
Right. And I'm sorry, Katie, did you want to add something to that?
No, that's great. I appreciate you, Ismael.
All right. And we have a national audience for both sides of the bars. I wonder what advice you would give to organizers and advocates in other states trying to pass similar laws or any criminal legal system reforms in general.
We find, sort of at the base of our theory of change is that people who have been impacted by a given issue need to help and lead the way, both formulating the solution and creating the power that gets it done. And then in addition to that, having a intertwined legislative strategy, organizing and power building strategy, and communications and narrative change strategy, that we really need all three prongs to be able to create the kind of material changes we want to see.
Yeah, I always talk about the need for narrative shifting because the narrative is, so powerful. I wonder if you could say a little more about it, and maybe for the viewers to understand what we mean by shifting the narrative.
In order to get people, lawmakers, the public on board with an issue, we need to get people to understand why it's important. And so if we are able to tell stories, to create narratives in which the public or lawmakers see people in their full humanity, their full dignity, their fullness of their lives, their people's need to access jobs and housing, that makes things possible. Whereas if the New York Post or whoever your local reactionary newspaper is defines the narrative, then we make no progress. And so that piece about both centering people in their full humanity, and laying the framework for why a given bill is important is crucial.
Thank you for that. That's so important to share with the viewers. And also, are there any lessons learned and, like things that worked and things that didn't work along the way that you might want to share with the viewers?
Ismael, you got thoughts here?
Just things that didn't work. I don't know. We just everybody thinking together as a group. We actually we kind of like fine tune. I didn't see too many things that didn't work on my side, like because everybody's brainstorming together, and we pulled out the best thoughts, and we continue to do it today, like just to push forward.
Great. How about some of the things that did work, if you might want to share with the viewers?
You want me to do it, Katie?
Go for it.
So what did work is like speaking to people, getting people to tell their stories, like real stories. Like um it was better because you're not speaking like just from a piece of paper, right? Like myself, when I tell my story, there's no script. I'm just telling you what happened. And I think it hits more when people are telling true stories, and it gets people to understand and have more empathy and understanding. So
Right. And that's a great point, right? We had so many system impacted folks involved in the campaign. Could you talk a little bit about the importance of having folks with lived experience involved, and how you make sure that they're engaged?
Katie, me
Go
again.
for it.
You got it, Ishmael.
So I when I first got in the campaign, I I didn't have any experience or anything as far as doing any advocacy work, but by just telling my story, and then when I hear other people's stories, I really believe that like getting people who've been impacted and also people who've been affected by formerly incarcerated individuals, or the victims, or like just showing that these people can do things together, and it helps to tell other people like you don't have to like always be fighting. Like we can agree, and we can make change as long as we can sit down and have a conversation.
Right. So, I mean, you guys did an amazing job with the campaign. Of course, we were supporters along the way, but just watching you all work, it was an absolute pleasure. So thank you so much for the work that you both did, Katie, Ishmael. I know there's so many others that worked on the campaign that deserve their props. So thank you to you guys. And I just want to say thank you to the viewer audience for joining us here on both sides of the bars. And we'll see you on our next episode. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
you want to know how to reduce crime in America, in New York City, you do it one person at a time, creating an environment that celebrates the human spirit. Recidivism is a result of societal failure to do that. And Fortune has demonstrated that lives can change.
I tell people all the time, this is where I grew up. This is where I learned what being a man is and what being a productive citizen means.
It is the work of this great organization that has helped to shape my ideas, drive my conviction, and further deepen my commitment to the cause.
For more than half a century, you have amplified the voices of those who are impacted by unfair policies and helped thousands of justice-involved people transform their lives. You have led by example to show how we can help formerly incarcerated individuals come home, rebuild their lives, and contribute to our communities.
It's never about the contract or the milestones first. It's always about the individual. These individuals were literally suffering in incarceration because they just didn't have an address to go to. And for them to walk into a place where it's about them and only them and what they need and only what they need.
There's one person in particular, he came through our programs and he ended up opening his own construction company, and he came back to Fortune and said, I want to hire people from here, and it was like about how if you lift one person up, they lift others. Even if it's just one person that this happens to, it's worth it. And I know that it's not just one person, it's many people.
COVID-19 worsened existing barriers to reentry. Reentry is hard enough as is, but even harder during a pandemic. As people were released from Rikers early due to COVID-19, our services and housing were needed even more.
Fortune Society has kept their doors open during the pandemic. We offer them incentives when they arrive to the community, as well as refer them to specific resources. And we also host our workshops virtually where the clients are able to remain engaged. And we also launched our care package program, and where we were able to provide over 200 care packages with toiletries to clients that were released into the community.